This podcast is brought to you by my company, Momentum Worldwide Movers. We focus on providing tailor-made solutions to match the needs and specific requirements of each and every customer, since every move is unique. Today we welcome Tom Kobayashi, who was born to a Japanese father and English mother. Tom spent his early years in a remote mountain commune in Yamanashi before moving to the UK. A cross-cultural journey that shaped his lifelong curiosity about identity, belonging, and what it means to thrive in diverse environments. All right, Tom.
Hi, Jeremy.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for being here today. So you are our first guest who spent his childhood in Japan.
Okay.
You moved to the UK when you were 8, yes?
That's right, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could you tell me a little bit more about that experience?
Sure, yeah. So I grew up in a very remote village in the mountains of Yamanashi, and it was quite unique in that it was a cooperative dairy farm with only 5 families, and most were Japanese, apart from our family. So my father's Japanese and my mother's English. And they were representatives of a Swiss NGO called SCI, which is Service Civil International. And it's a voluntary organisation. And the idea really is to bring people together, to work on a project, and at the same time put the world to rights, kind of thing. Yeah. So this was the 60s, so very kind of hippie idealism, but very kind of, their minds and hearts in the right place. So I grew up in this very lush valley, full of cows and very few people. And it was quite joyous as a child to kind of run through the hills and the mountains and the trees and the rivers. So very nature and very free. So when I got to 8, so my parents basically were coming up to a point where they had to make a choice. I was going to an elementary school, which the village also had, which was actually the smallest elementary school in Japan at the time. Only 2 students and 1 teacher. And as you know, with Japanese elementary school, you start at 6, and then you go on until, I think it's 12, right? So I was 8, so about halfway through. But what it meant was that if we decided to stay in Japan, then me and my brothers, and I had 3 brothers at the time, would all have had to basically go down into the big town or move somewhere else and be apart from my parents. So they kind of made a decision to move back to England. We took the scenic route, going via the Trans-Siberian Express, which was quite an epic journey in itself. And when we landed in England, so we were going to live with my English grandfather, who was an ex-military man, very proud, quite stiff and conservative, and a horde of hippies kind of invading his kind of suburban lifestyle. So it was very, it was a huge contrast and a big shock to the system, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
It sounds like that you were on a train or on a journey completely away from Japan, right?
Right.
So I'm kind of curious to know how you got pulled back into Japan. If you can just maybe talk about your education in the UK,
Sure.
and what led you back to coming home to Japan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, as many bicultural kids experience, they have this, that I went through a period of questioning, who am I? Where do I belong? And Japan obviously had this fascination for me. So we did take holidays. We used to come back for the summers, but there was always a pull there. And it was a gradual process in that I went to university and everything in the UK. I started my initial career in kind of banking and accounting, audit. And then I'd kind of finished a project in Australia and went back to the UK with nothing really planned. And it just so happened that there was a summer project with the same NGO which my parents had been in charge of in Japan, SCI, in Yamanashi. So I thought, wow, what a great opportunity to kind of come back here.
A little bit full circle.
Yeah, exactly, exactly, yeah. And the initial plan, and I think quite a few, non-Japanese people who come here, maybe come here for a short period, but end up staying for a long time. That's what kind of happened to me. I mean, basically, when I landed, I did the work camp, which was just a month, a summer in Yamanashi. And then I came back into Tokyo and was staying with some old family friends. And through that kind of network, I was introduced to a couple of amazing women who were setting up an international school. At very small scale, very kind of initial stages. But we got talking, and I'd always been quite fascinated with learning and education. And they were kind of looking for not another educator as such, but somebody who had business experience, because they didn't really have that aspect. So as a kind of three people, we kind of hit, a lot of kind of requirements to get a business started, and that's what we kind of did. And that kind of continued, as it were. And luckily, I still was a Japanese citizen, so it wasn't such an issue for me to keep, staying on here as many kind of non-Japanese face.
It became a project.
Yeah,
to
exactly.
keep you around.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Can you tell me more about what you were doing there? Because your background is what you studied in university, and what you did prior to that was more focused on accounting.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, at this international school, what were you responsible for?
So my official title was general manager. So basically that meant looking after things like the marketing, the kind of trying to attract new people to the school, taking care of the bills and the kind of accounts kind of thing. But also, it's a startup and very low head count, so it was kind of all hands on deck. And so I'll kind of assist, in the classes as well, get the classroom ready, do everything pretty much as any kind of startup.
You had to wear
does.
lots of hats, right?
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah. But it was extremely rewarding. Working with kids is an amazing experience because there's so much combustible energy in the room, and that was really kind of motivating. And I wanted to make sure that that business was a success as well, because we were focused on the Montessori method, which is a way to educate children not in a kind of autocratic manner, but it kind of gives them the responsibility of choosing learning paths, and the teachers are acting as facilitators. So they're there to make sure that if the students want to say learn how a television works, you'll go and find an old television, take it apart, and maybe scour your network to invite a TV engineer to come in and give a kind of lecture about how a television works. So that kind of thing. It was really interesting and a very different approach.
Very
to education.
hands-on.
Oh yeah,
right?
definitely, yeah. And they don't believe in tests either or exams. So that was quite unique as well, yeah.
So how did that get you involved in what you're doing now?
Right.
Because now you're doing something quite different.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's still, I suppose, related to developing people. So my official title is Talent Development Strategist, and I work for a company called Berkeley House, which is one of the oldest training companies in Tokyo. And what I do is, so my kind of main focus is helping our clients, and I focus on gaishike, non-Japanese companies, foreign capital companies, who are operating in Japan, which a lot of my prior experience was. So it was a good fit in that respect. And then really kind of mostly working with their kind of HR people and looking at, it could be very early stage with their strategies and how to develop people. And this could be like a 5-year plan. So kind of partnering with them to kind of strategize on that. Or it could be slotting in certain needs or, workshops, seminars, programs, which we can provide because we have quite a wide network of facilitators, instructors, teachers who can kind of come in and deliver those programs as well. So I'm kind of there as a bridge to, make sure that they can meet their expectations and their goals, and we're kind of there to support them, basically.
Yeah. You mention on your LinkedIn profile, you help organizations build workplaces where people feel human. So can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. So I think, and this is not just Japan, obviously, I think it's most companies. I think the way people feel or are treated within companies as such, or that kind of structure, it kind of dehumanizes them, you know. So you're kind of, the way they push or motivate people is to, you know, pay them with an increasing salary, give them titles and responsibilities. But is that really how people are motivated intrinsically? And that's not necessarily the case, you know. And a lot of people I work with want to change that kind of situation because, especially in the Japan market, we're kind of a ticking time bomb when it comes to demographics. You know, so the population's decreasing rapidly. There's no babies being born, basically. So that kind of talent pipeline is reducing quite drastically. So what that means in the future is that those companies are going to have to compete a hell of a lot more for that limited talent pool. So how do you kind of attract those people and make sure you engage with them and also retain them? And I think fundamentally what a lot of these companies are trying to do, and this is a gradual process, is to move away from this old kind of industrial-like approach to managing people to a more kind of holistic and human-centered way of actually getting the best out of people.
Because what it sounds like you're doing is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you're not just training people,
Right.
but you're also influencing the policy of the organizations.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yeah. So we like to see ourselves as partners with those clients. So not just, you know, a person on the end of the line just saying yes, no to what we can deliver. My approach has always been to try and collaborate and partner and come up with a kind of co-creation type situation, you know. And what I've found, especially with these big companies, is that the people in HR, their kind of bandwidth is limited, but the demands on their time is tremendously large. So they often appreciate the fact that if they can partner with somebody who can really help them and support them through some of the kind of key, you know, goals or projects that they're working on, it's kind of very much appreciated. And that's where you can kind of build this kind of longer term relationship with them as well.
So it sounds like your relationships are not so transactional.
Right. Yeah.
They're proper relationships, right?
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Some of the people I've worked with, you know, they've kind of grown into friends as well. Yeah. Yeah.
So you'll probably be working with a single client for years,
Yeah.
like you said.
Yeah. I mean, not in the present company, obviously, because I've been there for about a year and a half. But you know, previously, and you know, I've gone through several companies in a similar role, and you know, some of the longest relationships were 10+ years. So really, kind of building up on what we've done and what we can possibly do in the future as well. Yeah.
So you also mentioned that that AI is something that makes an experience more human,
Right.
and a lot of people, including the previous guest, would probably argue with you.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
So can you tell me a little bit more about AI and how you use this tool for what you do?
Sure.
Because I think that's a fascinating topic right now.
Oh yeah. I mean, you know, everybody's talking about it basically. How I kind of view AI is, again, as a collaborator in a way, but also a tool which can reduce those kind of mundane tasks. So, for example, like if we're engaging with a potential new client, you need to do some research, right? Some background on that particular client. So I often kind of utilize AI to get into what that company does and maybe what their mission is, what their vision is, what their values are, as opposed to kind of trying to scour their homepage and, you know, click through to the appropriate page, which can often be quite disorienting, maybe more so in Japanese homepages sometimes, you know, it's quite confusing. So as kind of AI is improved, and it does every single day, it's becoming much more accurate as to identifying, you know, those kind of sources as well.
And if you're dealing with HR
Yeah.
or finance people, they're going to be interested in the numbers, right?
Right.
Right. And AI probably has the latest numbers, I would imagine. Yeah.
It can definitely. So, one great way to utilize AI in that kind of background preparation is to just kind of get hold of the annual accounts, the annual report, and you can kind of put that into AI and basically quickly identify maybe appropriate or targeted areas like relating to HR.
Right. Yeah. And how long would an annual report from a company like Toyota be? It's got to be.
So how long it will take to kind of process? Or?
But no, the actual report is probably really long.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Right. I mean, it could be 100 pages, yeah.
Right.
200 pages,
right.
Yeah.
So probably AI can really easily extract the juicy bits.
In seconds, yeah.
Right,
yeah,
if you ask it to.
Exactly,
right.
yeah.
Right.
So the importance, as I'm sure your previous guest also identified, is the necessity to really play around with the prompts so that AI really understands what it is that you want. So the more accurate you are with that, the better you're able to kind of extract that information.
Now, does that require a bit of practice, right, to do the prompts and things like that?
Absolutely, yeah. Although what I have noticed with the latest kind of iterations with some of these platforms, with AI platforms, is that that's also becoming less needed, especially if you've been using it for quite some time. So I've been currently using my AI kind of model for about over a year. And so obviously they have this, they learn, right? They memorize and they retain what you've asked them and the interactions you've had. And it's quite amazing what they do kind of recall. And so what I found is it's becoming more natural. So you, at the beginning, so 1 year ago, you had to be very, very specific with the prompts. Now, and I'm not sure if this is just because of the development of the models or whether it's because they know me better, it isn't as necessary to do that. So, you know, you don't have to be so specific. It kind of reads your history, as it were. So if I'm doing the same kind of thing over and over, it'll kind of remember.
So there's a little bit of a trial and error kind of aspect, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And you have to check because, you know, it always says, you know, with the proviso that it's not guaranteed, it's accurate. So, you know, you've heard of these hallucinations, and that does happen, yeah.
Okay. So you use it more as a research tool.
That's one way I use it, yeah.
But do you teach or do you recommend a curriculum that incorporates AI?
Yes, yeah, definitely. So we have a curriculum team. So they're kind of currently utilizing AI. And so we have a mixture of content. You know, some are fairly fixed and others we need to customize. So when it comes to that kind of customization, AI is extremely useful to kind of drawing those other kind of fixed content and kind of mix it up very quickly. You know, so what kind of took maybe several weeks to put together takes maybe a day or two now. So it's kind of accelerated ability to create very customized content. So that kind of takes away and allows those kind of curriculum people to think more creatively and spend a bit more time maybe, you know, having that kind of initial discussion with the client as to what exactly they want to do.
Mm-hmm. So it can be a very useful tool then.
I don't think I can imagine not having it anymore, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm using it literally every single day. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you be comfortable sharing an example of how you would use it?
Yeah, I mean, so I've got my kind of model here. I'm not sure if we want to say what it is exactly, but it's this kind of, it's a very famous, model here.
Okay.
So for example, so let's say that I've got a meeting coming up with Nissan, just say, because we're in kind of Yokohama area. So I'd ask it, I have a meeting coming up with the CHRO, and we'll be discussing some HR strategies. Suggest relevant areas of discussion according to recent performance. Okay. So, I mean, it'll probably be a bit more thought out than that. But so it's, I've basically said, so Nissan, I have a meeting coming up with the CHRO and we'll be discussing some HR strategies. Suggest relevant areas of discussion according to, it should be recent performance. So then it's basically come up with this, so meeting with Nissan CHRO, focus on HR strategies and grounded in recent event performance. Here are key areas you can structure your discussion around. So it goes through a number of different points. So first one, talent development and upskilling based on innovation focus. It goes into what they're developing at the moment as a company. So things like EV is very kind of relevant. Employee engagement and retention. If events had high, low morale indicators. Diversity, equity and inclusion. Performance enablement. Internal communication strategy, well-being, resilience. So it's a very quick example, but it kind of gives you a starting point to really kind of dig deeper. And then this will basically be a conversation which I'll continue for, maybe 30 minutes or so, just to kind of refine it a lot more. And also ask it, okay, where did you actually get that information, so that it will actually provide a link to maybe the
do some fact checking.
Right? Yeah, exactly, which you do have to do. But that, I mean, that's literally
So
seconds, right?
you invest about an hour of your time, basically.
If it's, for example, if it's that kind of process,
Hypothetically, for preparing for a meeting or something like that.
Yeah.
Is,
Exactly. Yeah. Which would have taken maybe, I don't know, in the past, maybe at least half a day or something.
Do you see a lot of Japanese companies utilizing AI these days?
Yes, yeah. I mean, especially the kind of bigger conglomerates. So kind of champions of AI, companies like NEC and Fujitsu. They're kind of going into partnerships with those kind of major AI companies, or Microsoft, for example. So they're really kind of trying to get on the front foot, because also with their services and what they're providing, which they're kind of shifting more into IT consulting as well. So I think they see, the bigger picture is that their customers are also going to be asking them about how to best utilize AI. So they're kind of early adopters when it comes to kind of Japanese conglomerates and big companies as well.
You see some companies invest in their own in-house software, right? Which is probably a good investment, because it's everybody, all the employees would be kind of on the same page, if that makes sense, right? They would have to go through the same training, right, of a tool, which would be, developed specifically for that company, right. But then, the concern is that some people might not like to use AI, right? So, how do you keep your staff happy? If AI is such a big requirement, or is it just that's just the world we live in now, right? It's like using a computer now, right?
Yeah.
So it's an interesting question to ask, I think.
It's really interesting. I think it also comes down to, how would you kind of transform, because it's a cultural transformation within any organization. So to shift from, what you're doing kind of manually to this amazing tool. And a lot of people are cautious because they think, I don't want to share information. Where's it going? There's all these issues about privacy, especially in Japan, which is very, very strict about that.
Yeah, I mean, I was at an event that was sponsored by a recruitment company, one of the famous ones. It's from the UK.
Okay.
They have a very big office in Japan, but they did some a survey, right, from of HR and I think candidates as well, and AI came up as a topic, right, of concern. I can't quite remember specifically what it was, but it got me thinking that if you're a recruiter or if you're in HR and you're trying to hire talent, and let's say that they're a little bit older, maybe they're in their late 40s or their 50s,
Right.
and they just don't, they're not tech savvy,
Right.
and they don't really, maybe they're kind of afraid or a bit reserved about getting into AI.
Yeah.
Right? And if you got to work for a certain company, you have to have your AI game up.
Oh yeah.
And that might be a challenge during the onboarding process.
Right.
Right? And that might put off a certain person who maybe they're just a stellar candidate.
Sure.
But they're just like, yeah, doing this AI stuff is not it's not what I want to do.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's really, it kind of, one comes down to how you sell it, in a way, and sometimes these kind of initiatives do fall to HR. So how do you approach this project to really evangelize how beneficial AI can be? And, it's like a lot of other, hot projects, as it were, or initiatives that companies try to push through. There's always going to be people who are a bit resistant, but I think what you need to maybe identify within an organization are kind of champions or evangelists who can be close to those people and who are a resource to call upon. So if you have a quite supportive organizational structure, with coaches and mentors, for example, that can be part of that ecosystem to have these kind of AI, experts, as it were, who kind of can step in and answer any questions and show really how useful it is. And it does take time to kind of embed, but once I think people see the difference as to what they're doing with certain tasks, often it's a kind of conversion, into kind of enthusiasm.
But they have to see the results, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So you said it depends on how you sell it.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
In your industry, do you enjoy the selling aspect or the training aspect more, or the kind of, you know what I mean, kind of the policy and things like that?
Right.
Yeah. Where would you come from?
Yeah. A bit of both.
It's a bit of both.
Yeah. So I've been in that kind of sales role, and I do enjoy that because if you take an approach where you're really trying to understand a client and dig deeper as opposed to just this kind of transactional sales, that's where you can really provide something that's actually useful and long term. And it takes practice, obviously, and experience. But this kind of consultative selling approach is a lot more fulfilling because then you kind of go much deeper into what a client is going through, right? So it's not just about saying, they may say, okay, we just need to train 30 people on effective presentation skills in English because they're going to be moved abroad in 6 months' time. But okay, so what's happening within the organization that's actually going to happen? You're sending 30 people abroad, that's maybe 30 families. How's that affecting the people? What other support do they need? So, you can quickly identify maybe it's not just about presentation skills. It could be filtered down into supporting the family members learn English so that they can hit the ground a lot more comfortably once they get to their kind of destination as well.
So it sounds like that there's a lot of potential to upsell. I'll just use that word to to make some more cash. But I mean, but also to identify problems, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think it's just about identifying what you can sell, but it's developing the relationship, and it's learning about the client.
Oh yeah.
Like you mentioned, right?
I think just to kind of dig deeper a bit, I think sales often have this quite negative connotation. You say if you're in sales, then people would just think, oh, you're just kind of step away.
I think it used to more. I think it's not. People aren't just cold calling all the time anymore.
No, exactly, yeah.
Right,
but at the same time, sales is about one. It's about building relationships, and that can be applied to almost any aspect of life. And then also trying to understand the other person, to empathize with them, and to actually ask those questions which open up maybe a train of thought, which isn't just limited to one kind of focus, right?
Asking the right questions,
yes,
right?
Exactly,
and not too sensitive questions.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Right. Okay. Talking about sensitivity, then I think I'll jump into to a topic that I really wanted to discuss with you, and that's about mental health.
Yeah.
And I mean that's directly related to what you do.
Sure.
But it's a big issue everywhere, but also in Japan as well.
Oh yeah.
And it's Mental Health Awareness Month, right?
It is, yes.
Is this a global thing, or is it just in Japan? May?
I think it's global.
It's global, yeah.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, May.
So, can you tell me a bit of the challenges with mental health that you may have experienced,
Sure.
both personally, but also with certain clients, because I suppose that's prevalent, and also about how do you feel mental health is being addressed in Japan specifically?
Yeah. I think Japan as a culture, when you think of people, they're very stoic, and you don't necessarily see the suffering beneath the surface, right? There's always a mask or two being worn, especially in the work environment. So that's a challenge in itself, because ideally what you want to create within an organization is an environment where people feel safe enough to speak up. So if they are suffering in some way, to have that conversation, maybe with their manager or with their colleagues, or with HR or whoever, but to actually be able to do that. Now, the issue at the moment, I think, is that in many organizations still, most people don't feel safe. So the psychological safety is not there. So they kind of feel this will be a marker, a black mark against their name, and maybe their promotion prospects or their career would suffer from that. I think it's changing. And it could be because of a generational change, or just a growing awareness of mental health generally. And this is through a lot of kind of initiatives, publications, events, which happen, more regularly now. So personally speaking, so I suppose from my initial career in banking, I went through a period where I burnt out, basically. And burnout is when you reach a point beyond exhaustion. So, you're in a high stress environment, overloaded, maybe not getting enough sleep, maybe drinking too much, and really not probably communicating what you're kind of feeling. So, you want to perform, you want to do the best, but you're kind of ignoring these obvious signals that are coming through your body and your mind that you should really be stopping and taking a break or something. And it's extremely common, and probably more common with men than women.
Why is that?
You can probably imagine, right? I think a lot of men put up this front of toughness, that they can put up with things,
They don't. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not,
don't
again,
complain?
it's case by case, but
Yeah.
it's fairly common. It does seem to be more common in men.
Yeah.
They don't tend to open up about how they're feeling as much as women do.
Right.
And so it is a big issue. Yeah.
You mentioned drinking.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of men, I think this is probably changing too these days, but they release their stress when they go
Oh, yeah.
drinking with their mates.
Exactly, yeah.
And that can lead into binge drinking.
Yeah,
And,
very easily, yeah.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Which, you know,
and that's going to affect performance.
You know,
right?
I did, you know, to be completely transparent. In British culture, you know, going to the pub with your mates and going
This is helpful.
and going on a bender, you know, drinking 10 pints in one night or something, it was, I think, fairly common. I'm not sure what the situation is now.
Well, I think people still do that. You know, especially in Japan, alcohol is everywhere.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's in the convenience store.
Exactly,
you know,
yeah.
so.
Very accessible. Yeah. But I think what I've noticed is that there does seem to be a trend, especially maybe through the younger generations, where there seems to be less interest in alcohol than there certainly was when I was their age. You know, because going to the pub was, everybody did it whether they wanted to or not. You know, it was just an expectation. And
It's like going to church.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I certainly enjoyed it, but it wasn't sustainable, you know. So I've kind of, so I still drink occasionally, but certainly not to the volume or the, you know, the extent that I used to. And it's made an amazing, you know, change in my lifestyle and how I feel generally, you know. So it's personal choice, obviously.
Right.
But it's a performance inhibitor, you know, what I found, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's probably a good point to talk about how you stay in shape.
Yeah.
And you do karate.
So I did karate.
You did
Yeah,
karate.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So I saw that you studied karate in university, or
Right.
you trained, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But you were in tournaments, right?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So I started when I was 13, and so when we moved to England, my parents had another child, and it was another boy. So we were 5 boys in one house. So you can kind of imagine the testosterone was just off the charts, basically. We were smashing things, fighting each other. So my father noticed that there was a karate club opening near to where we were living, and he just signed us up and just dragged us down there on the first day to basically, you know, get all that kind of pent-up energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I fell in love with it. I really.
I did
really
judo
liked it.
for
You did? Okay.
for
Right.
a few months, but
Yeah.
it was a very intense few
Okay.
months.
Yeah, yeah,
So I
right.
mean, if you're doing this every other day,
Yeah.
martial arts,
Yeah.
that's excellent stress release.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I think, so I kind of continued it through my teens into university, where I kind of stepped up. So I joined the university club, became team captain, and we competed. So we were kind of national champions. I placed on individual level as well, within the kind of university competition kind of framework kind of thing. So what it kind of gave me was this kind of so I could focus on myself and kind of still a lot of these kind of thoughts that I had, which just tended to go in a negative spiral. So when I was in the dojo and practicing, I couldn't really think of anything else. You know, I could just focus on the next move, on the kumite, the fighting, you know, the kata, the forms. And actually, so again, you know, this kind of connecting the dots kind of thing. You know, what I'm doing now is about people development, and that was probably the first experience of instruction. You know, so I was, you know, and to be modest, I was pretty good. And so my sensei, who was one of the top sensei in the country, you know, he would often ask me to maybe start doing the warm-ups at first. And then when he was away, he would kind of give me the responsibility to just put together a lesson, you know, the kind of session. And so that was when I got into planning sessions and, you know, structuring those and getting that kind of feedback from the other people who were participating was really, really rewarding. And I could see now, in hindsight, that that was probably the first inkling of what I would eventually be doing, which is, talent development. Yeah.
It's all interconnected, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
So where's your dojo now? And metaphorically speaking, your mind,
yeah. So it's funny because
your mind is your temple, right?
It is, yeah, right. Yeah. I think so. What karate still has, it's still within me. So I still practice the kata, and I try and kind of teach some basic moves to my kids. So I have a son and a daughter, and maybe more so for the daughter. She kind of comes into her teen years. I want to make sure that she can look after herself if any kind of situation arises. And I think, karate or any martial art, one of the key things is that it gives you that sense of control of your body, which is extremely powerful. Because a lot of people feel they don't control or they can't control their body. So one of the things with karate is that you get this overall sense of every single part of your body and how it moves and how it's coordinated, how you breathe, how you can exert power, and how you need to be relaxed to move quickly. And so it's kind of a, for me it was very appropriate timing to have that in my life. And it's kind of, carried through the rest of my life as well. Even though I don't actively practice now, it's still there somewhere within this.
You remember all the pain, right?
Yeah.
but it's right. It's weakness releasing. It's weakness being released from the body, right?
Yes. Yeah. And the pain so my nose was broken 7 times in competition.
Oh wow!
And so it's still a bit wonky kind of thing. So this is one kind of memento I have.
Yeah.
of those kind of days.
Yeah. It's like the cauliflower years.
Exactly.
In judo. I didn't do it long enough to get there. Right. But I said, nah, I'm not gonna.
Right.
Okay. Last question, which is what I like to end things with, is do you see yourself just staying in Japan for the long run, or do you think you'll? I know you've moved back and forth,
right.
Mostly between Japan and the UK.
Yeah.
But what do you see your future being in Japan?
I think Japan is home.
Yeah.
We're kind of settled. We've built our own house. My kids are going to Japanese school. My wife has her kind of career as well. But never say never. So I've always been fascinated with Southeast Asia. Places like Singapore as a hub where so much is concentrated. So
right.
It's a possibility. I never say no.
Right. It's kind of a gentle stepping stone, isn't it?
Right, yeah.
Japan to Singapore
Right.
or Hong Kong
or
even places like Jakarta, or KL, right? It's they also have big Japanese communities there.
They do, yeah.
So
and so much happening, right?
And there's things are happening.
Right. There's such a growth mentality there.
Right.
And economically, it's a lot more kinetic, I think, compared to Japan, which is a lot more kind of, older, as it were, in their kind of economic life cycle.
Old school.
Yeah, in a way. Yeah.
I just came from the mountains, so.
Right,
Yeah. Old.
Yeah.
Well, Tom, thank you so much.
No, thank you, Jeremy. Yeah.
Thank you for being on the podcast, and we'll see you soon.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, take care.
Cheers. Thank you.
Yeah.